Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of this interview series. Today I'm joined by Alex Pereira, who is a principal product designer at Microsoft. In this interview, he'll be talking about how he got into product design. He'll be explaining what product design is and how you can get into product design. So Alex, how's it going?
It's going great. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Well, I guess you can start off. You can tell the people what you do at Microsoft.
Sure, yeah. So I'm a principal product designer at Microsoft. You and I both work on Azure Communication Services, which is a relatively new team and new business to Microsoft. So for those who don't know, it's a developer platform intended to help companies and products basically build communication capabilities and experiences into their solutions. So yeah, I'm a designer working on that along with a few hundred other people.
Yeah. So I guess walk us through your day. What's an average day like for you?
Yeah, for sure. So I think at any given time, I'm working on maybe about a half dozen kind of different product problems that I would say. So oftentimes, some of those problems might be in the early stages where we're trying to identify and really understand the problem or the opportunity well. Some of them might be a little bit more developed in that we're thinking about potential solutions and we're ideating and trying to figure out what are the different options that are available to us. And then maybe further along in the process, I might be taking maybe some of those leading ideas and actually producing design specs or prototypes, often in Figma, which is the primary design software that I use. And then if I'm not doing that, then I might be testing some of these designs with customers, just to help inform kind of what's going to perform well and what still needs refinement. So I would say like the bulk of my day is usually any one of those things, and it's usually kind of a balance of all those things at any given time. Yeah.
Okay. So I guess you're a principal product designer. So walk us through product design. Like what exactly is this?
Yeah, so product design is basically the discipline of producing and generating product ideas at a high level at a software company. I think the discipline of product design more broadly outside of software has to do with just like the actual sort of form and function of any product. So it could be, like a remote control that you might use to use your TV, but it also might just be something a little bit more innocuous, like how a handle is designed on a refrigerator. But sort of as it relates to software, it generally means kind of thinking through the interface between the human and the technology. So often just trying to understand and facilitate kind of what the user is trying to do in that moment. Usually in software, the person who's using the app or service, like they have some goal or intention in mind, and good product design really, I think the goal of good product design is to really understand what that goal is and really facilitate it through software.
So what's the journey like to product design? So someone interested into getting into this field, what's the journey like to that? What was your journey?
Yeah, so my journey was definitely, I would say, not very typical. So for me, I actually went to university in computer engineering, so like a traditional kind of software engineering education. Through that process, I really enjoyed it, but I don't know that I was necessarily, it wasn't necessarily my passion. So as I was exiting my program and sort of looking at opportunities in the market for my skills, I came across what they called program management role at Microsoft. They now call it product management. So this is basically the role of defining the product and the roadmap and facilitating kind of the product development process. So it definitely required a technical background, which I had, but it didn't necessarily mean I was going to be coding every single day. So that seemed like a good, and it was very well aligned to some kind of roles that I found myself in like group projects and stuff at school. So it seemed like something that it was well aligned to me. So I don't remember actually knowing much about design or even the product design role or discipline as I was exiting school. I'm not sure why that is, but that's kind of, I remember that kind of being the case. But when I joined Microsoft, I happened to have joined a team, I think by chance, that was very they were very focused on the user experience of the product, specifically on Windows at the time. So I found myself surrounded by a lot of people who, some of whom were designers, some of who were program managers like myself, but all of whom were focused on the user experience and the design of the product. And I found myself really enjoying that part of the job, which I was lucky enough to be able to do, much more than the traditional kind of aspects and responsibilities of the product management role.
Yeah.
So it was about 3 years into my career at Microsoft. I was still a program manager. I was doing great, moving up the ladder within the company. However, there was a bit of a redefinition of the roles happening, both on our team and just broadly at Microsoft. So this is when they were transitioning from the discipline of program manager to product manager. And there were a lot of people like myself who were technically program managers, but who were taking on the responsibility of design in some respects. So those people, they were basically given the choice to become product managers or become product designers. So it was a very interesting and unique opportunity, not one that probably happens all that often, but it presented an opportunity for me to decide kind of the next step in my career, whether I want to continue down the program management role, which I was doing, I was doing well at, but I could tell wasn't necessarily my passion, or pursue this new product design role, which was frankly like really scary. It was a lot of unknown. I was doing design in some ways, but there was a lot of sort of the basics of the discipline and a lot of the rigor and a lot of techniques and just technical capability in the design role that I hadn't quite learned yet. So, but I took that leap of faith and I found myself in that role. And I thankfully had a manager at the time who was very supportive and very showed a lot of belief in me and my peers who were making similar jumps. So yeah, I was able to make that transition, and I've been sort of progressing since then and constantly looking to learn more skills and have new kind of experiences on different products. And so I've been doing that for the last 7 years or so as a product designer.
Well, I didn't know that. So you transitioned from a computer engineering background to design background.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So people who want to get into this design industry, who don't have a like a tech background like yourself in computer engineering or computer science, but they had a background in design and they want to get into the design industry. So how do they get themselves noticed? Like, what do they do to set themselves apart, specifically for product design?
Yeah, so I would say that's actually probably the more traditional route towards product and user experience design, which is, I think, more specific. So I feel like there's a pretty decently carved path for those types of people. There's a lot of arts and design schools. There's a few here in Vancouver that offer kind of the foundations of design, but also a pathway into more technical roles, specifically in digital product design or user experience design, like what we do here at Microsoft. So I would say, generally, I would look out for those programs. In terms of just like advice for those specific people, I think it's important to work on real projects, things that are actually like real things that you're building or a broader team is building. It's really easy. I see a lot of people online building kind of hypothetical products. I think that's a cool exercise and definitely something that is great to kind of demonstrate your skills and to kind of explore new avenues and new technologies that you might not have experience in otherwise. However, I think it's important to balance that with building real products. The reason being, in building products, there's a lot of difficult constraints that you're often met with. And I think part of the challenge And also the opportunity in product design is to sort of work around those constraints and deeply understand them um,
Yeah.
and deliver something that's compelling to your users.
Yeah, I've noticed that as well. Like just researching online, like say mock-ups on say like a restaurant website.
Yeah.
A lot of stuff that like I wouldn't find any restaurant implementing. Like a lot of fancy design going on, but
Yeah,
not exactly practical. I've noticed that as well. Yeah.
exactly. And you should ask yourself, like, why is
It looks cool,
it
but
looks
like
great?
when you
Yeah,
ask the developer, it's
it no doubt looks great.
yeah.
And I see a lot of people like high-fiving and like getting really excited about this type of like work. And I think it's great for, setting, whether it's like an aesthetic direction, or exploring, very hyper simplification of certain experiences, like, really minimal UI. But maybe it's just me, I'm really interested in actually pragmatic and realistic solutions.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean it can't be beautiful. It should be beautiful. It doesn't mean it can't be aesthetic. It should also be aesthetic.
Yeah.
But I think fundamental and the most fun, more important than all those things is that it's usable and that it solves the user's need. And it can do so in a way that the users are going to understand. And I find a lot of these exercises, I look at them and I think, and this is just a hypothesis of mine. We would have to actually test the experience. I can't help but think to myself, it looks amazing. I don't know if users would actually be successful using this product.
So talking on this point, were there any like books, courses, or things that you did like to help you understand all these design principles, like staying like minimal, like designing like practical solutions, like to get a sense of those principles? Were there any resources that helped you?
I would say there's not one resource. There's a lot of things out there. I would say,
like, how did you learn like how to create a practical product?
Yeah, I would say honestly the thing that has probably developed my design thinking and design philosophy up until this point has been more so not necessarily a resource, but more so a mindset. And the mindset is of curiosity of all the products that I use and interface with on a daily basis. So there's actually so I can probably trace it back to a book that I read called The Design of Everyday Things. I think it's Don Norman. Who is the author? I might be incorrect. Yeah, Design of Everyday Things, and it's a really easy read. It might be like 150 pages or something. And basically, the premise of the book is it explains how to think about the design of all the products that you use on a daily basis, and all of the attributes that go into really good designed products and poorly designed ones. And you actually in the book they lay out really good examples of even products that most people would consider very well designed, but are actually terrible designs. And maybe an example of that is similar to what we were just discussing, something that's very aesthetic, very maybe minimal, but not practical. And when the practicality and when the usability suffer as a result of the aesthetics of a product, that can have like very real consequences in the world. So like some examples of this, I think a famous example in the book, and maybe one you can relate to, are doors that have handles that are vertical and where you grab the handle like this, so it sort of implies that you're meant to pull on the door to open it, but these are actually push doors. So how many of those doors do you pull and it doesn't move, and you have that moment of frustration thinking like, why do I feel like it should work this way? That's a perfect example of just a poorly designed product. So
well, yeah, so I guess on that note, when you're talking about say like this book outlines design principles like being practical, compared to say software engineering, so now with the internet, a lot of people can just learn how to code online, like learn how to create software, and they don't necessarily need a degree. So that traditional pathway is now optional. It's not mandatory now. With engineering roles. Now with design, considering, so my thought is that it's harder, it's more competitive in the design field because you always have like more engineers than designers. Like for example, in our team, like we have you, but then there's so many, like 3, 4 teams that are talking to you.
Yeah.
So considering, like taking that into consideration as well, do you think for designers who want to get into like the high level, industry level, like product design area, do they need the traditional like university, get a diploma, do this like training route, or is that all accessible online, do you think now? Like, do you
Yeah,
think like without going to a university or like a formal institute, people would make good designers?
I think, and I think honestly, this applies to most technical disciplines. You don't necessarily need a university degree, but it helps a lot. So I think it's the same answer for engineers as it is for designers. I don't know if you feel that way for engineers, but there are certainly examples of people who, either dropped out of school or didn't do school at all, who can be phenomenal engineers, and similarly for design. That being said, for the average person, it's going to be very beneficial to go to school, and it's for a lot of reasons outside of just learning design skills. I personally exited my degree learning next to no design skills, but what I did learn is how to, break down really complicated problems, how to handle situations when I had no idea what was going on, and have confidence in my abilities to kind of like slowly figure things out bit by bit. Understanding how to work in a large team where people are all moving in different directions and how to lead the team all in a singular direction. So all of those they're not necessarily hard skills. Most of them are, soft skills. But those are skills that are difficult to replicate outside of school. They can be. If you're dropping out of school, if you're not taking school because you're starting your own business or trying to build your own product, then you're going to learn a lot of these things, especially in the context of a team. But for most people, I think it's a much safer approach just to get that foundation of some technical ability as well as just the soft skills that come with working on a team and in a school project or whatnot, and then going from there.
Okay, yeah. So it's almost the same you're saying as engineering, like.
I think so.
Because I was curious about that. Because engineering now, I mean, the traditional route is still pretty valid, like going through an institute.
Yeah.
But now we're seeing more and more examples of people who don't necessarily go through a formal training. They can still break into the industry. So I was curious about like design, about product design, if that's still the case or not. Because I think, well, my theory so far is like getting into product design is way harder than getting into software engineering, just because there's so less opportunities. So I was curious about that.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that. I don't know. I don't really have. It'd be interesting to look at kind of the metrics to validate that hypothesis, because I would agree there's definitely fewer job positions, but there also might be fewer. The labor market might not be saturated in that role compared to engineers. Like for the last 5 years, it's like everybody needs to learn to code. It's like everybody needs to become an engineer. So
there's that element.
So yeah, there's certainly not as many designers at Microsoft as there are engineers, but yeah, there also might be fewer people studying it, and fewer people pursuing that career path.
Okay, well, I guess we'll end off with this one. So people who want to become a product designer, they don't know where to get started, but they want to do this. Like they have a passion for designing stuff, like making designs, user experiences.
Yeah.
What do they do? Like what's a roadmap they can follow to get into, to be qualified to be considered for like an industry level product design job?
Yeah, so I would say it kind of depends on where they are already in their kind of career progression.
Say like high school or college students, they're not exactly sure what they want to do in life, like what career, but they have interest in design. Totally, they have a passion for it. So what about those people? Like, what do you think? Like, what's a roadmap for them? Like, if you can, like, simply outline.
Yeah. So if you're already in school, maybe you're not, in a computer program, maybe like you took arts or business. I would say try to find opportunities where you can start to just put yourself in a position where, you're going to start to develop these skills and put your skills to the test. So, it might be, I remember at UBC, there was an entrepreneurship opportunity where they actually paired people with business, who are in the business program, with
Mhm.
people who are, I think, in the engineering program or CS program,
Yep.
and they combine to like create businesses. So I can imagine, even if you're in the business program, like you could do that sort of thing, and be the product designer. Similarly, like maybe you have opportunity to take sort of product design classes
Yep.
in your university if you have electives. I know it's a bit ironic, but when I was at UBC, I had actually already gotten hired at Microsoft, and I think I had a half a term left, and it was a very light term.
Mhm.
And I remember I didn't even officially take the class, but I audited. I think it was some sort of design class. So it's funny that I didn't actually take that
Take that. So you
at
ended up a
all.
designer.
I think it was they didn't even call it product design. I think it was called it like HCI, human
Mhm.
computer interaction, which is kind of an old school term. But so yeah, if there's opportunity for you to take those classes, then I'll absolutely take those. In the absence of those, I think there's a lot you can do just in terms of your personal projects. Like when I was applying for Microsoft, I think one of the things that maybe stood out, because I didn't actually have a lot of work experience, was I had some sort of personal projects that I was able to talk
Mhm.
about. They weren't design projects because I wasn't applying for a
Yeah.
design role, but in my case, they were sort of coding projects and sort of showed both my technical
Yeah.
ability, but also my ability to like understand a problem and develop a
Mhm.
solution. So similarly in the design discipline, um, I think maybe seeing finding like a finding an app that you don't like using because you think it's poorly designed, and like going
Mhm.
through the exercise of
Yeah.
like designing it better, coming up with a process for how you might actually, if you were
Yeah.
the designer on this, like how would you actually make it better?
Mhm.
Just to kind of to force you to go through the steps of enumerating the problems,
Yeah.
maybe validating some hypotheses that you have, and coming up with some solutions to make it better.
Yeah. Yeah, because I think that's definitely important because product design is an emerging market now. It'll only grow because like you look at all the apps that are available. For example, like say TikTok, Instagram,
Yeah,
YouTube Shorts.
yeah,
All three like have the same level of functionality, but what makes them different is the experience, user experience that provide.
yeah,
So this is an emerging market, and well, thank you so much for joining me. Thank you for explaining what product design is, going through your journey.
absolutely.
Yeah, and I hope you guys have enjoyed our conversation as well. Let me know in the comments below what you thought of this, and I'll see you in the next video.